Hi, I'm your host, Kevin Eikenberry, and usually these episodes are about me sharing a short piece of information with you or bringing on a guest. But for the next 6 weeks, as a part of this very special series called The Evolving Workplace, I'll be handing the mic over to Wayne Turmel. Wayne's been my co-author of The Long Distance Leader twice, The Long Distance Teammate, and The Long Distance Team. And he's been the host of an ongoing podcast called Long Distance Work Life Podcast, which has just come to a close. Although all those episodes are worth your time, go to longdistanceworklife.com to learn more. In this series, Wayne will give new context and new ideas for us as leaders to understand the evolving workplace and how we can lead our organizations and teams through it. Hope you will enjoy all of these episodes in the series, and I hope you'll continue to enjoy everything else we bring you on the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. And now, here's Wayne.
Hi, everybody. This is Wayne Turmel. I am a master trainer and the subject matter expert on the evolving workplace for the Kevin Eikenberry Group. And this is the fourth of our 6-part podcast series on the evolving workplace. We started with some context, right? Episode 1 was, how did we get here? Episode 2 is the world is kind of divided between remote, hybrid, and in office. Last episode, we talked about the technology trends that we're all going to run into in the next 5 years. And now we want to answer, so what? So this episode will be about, so what does this mean at an organizational level? Next time, we'll look at what does it mean for individuals. And then the last episode will be, what does this mean for leaders? All right, so what are the choices that organizations are going to have to make in the next 5 years or so to stay ahead of the competition, to serve their customers, to stay in business in some cases? And I want to look at kind of all of this. Here are 5 trends that I think are going to happen in the next little bit. The first, and stop me if you're sick of this already, is the use and increased power of AI. It's happening now. The famous and wildly overused William Burroughs quote, the future is here, it just isn't evenly distributed yet, is more true than it's ever been. And also, it's a little bit restrictive because it presumes that we're all chasing each other's tails. But AI is going to be a huge part of any decision making that organizations are going forward. And I'm not being alarmist, but we've already interacted with chatbots. We may think that Dwayne at customer service is a live person. He probably isn't. But this is going to change the very structure of what companies work like. We've talked before about how the fact that in 1990, somewhere between 6 and 7% of the workforce was in admin, secretarial jobs. We don't even call them that anymore. But 6 to 7% of the workforce, that's around 7-8 million people, were employed in jobs that to a great degree don't exist. I mean, less than 2% of the workforce is now labeled as admin or secretarial. And even then, the jobs that those people do are very different than when my mom was a secretary back in the day. Another example, and this is important because it's more recent and we can get our heads around this one, is the concept of bank tellers. If you look at the raw data, the number of people employed as bank tellers has dropped about 60% since the introduction of the ATM. Banks aren't opening new branches, and if they are smaller, and they are designed to serve largely older people, poorer people, people who maybe aren't technologically savvy. And the role of the teller itself is very, very different. If you look at what a bank teller does now as opposed to what they did 10 years ago, bank tellers never used to be allowed to open accounts. You had to go to a account opening specialist. Well, now you can do that on the counter. If you've ever had to replace an ATM card and had them knock one out right at the desk, you know that it's a very different world. And so the role of a bank teller, just as an example, has wildly changed. The people who work in customer service facing roles are filling largely what those roles used to be. And this has an impact on things like productivity. Individual people handle much more productive interactions. The actual productivity per person has skyrocketed, despite the fact that apparently humans are lazy and easily replaced. But you don't need to perform the simple tasks. AI will do that. But there are going to be roles for humans that look very different. A similar change happened after the introduction of the PC and laptops. And some of you listening to this will understand, the reason that the number of secretaries and admins reduced was suddenly people were able to handle their own correspondence, build their own presentations, do their own invoicing, for example, because it's all automated. And yet that took time from other functions that people were supposed to do. So the average salesperson, the average manager now does not only more work than their person in the past in terms of number of calls and all of that, but it's also they're doing the admin work on top of the stuff that they're doing. So the productivity is way more than it used to be. And the expectations of a salesperson are now so very, very different. What is your organization's business? What do the people in your organization do? And what will they be expected to do in the future are important questions that organizations need to figure out, and the sooner the better. Of course, as is often the case, the people on the bleeding edge of this are the sales department. Businesses do not exist unless somebody is bringing in revenue, right? Well, the role of a salesperson is different than it's ever been. And not only that, reaching customers and interacting with customers and what salespeople are expected to do with their customers has changed dramatically. It used to be very simple. You were either inbound, you sat by the phone and you took orders and you serviced your customers that way, or you reached out. You did things like cold calling and emails and mailing and visiting, dropping by offices. And the problem is that with cell phones, with people working from home, that kind of outreach largely doesn't work anymore. And, people block their cell phones. When was the last time you made a phone call and the person actually answered? Unless they were expecting you. Heck, if you're a parent, you can't even get your own kid to answer the phone and you're paying the phone bill, right? That culturally, we don't pick up the phone. We don't check voicemails. We largely reject any email coming in that we don't recognize the source from as spam. Well, if I'm an organization trying to grow my business, these are challenges that we're going to have to overcome. And some of this, AI is assisting some of this, helping us write more targeted, more focused emails, although there is some personal touch that's being lost in that. But organizations are going to have to adapt to new ways of reaching their customers, because the old ways, quite frankly, no matter how hard you work, aren't effective anymore. And you have to find people to do the work. The problem is if you eliminate a whole group of jobs, you eliminate 60% of the bank tellers, and you still need to replace existing bank tellers, but they're now doing very different jobs than the people that were let go. Finding, employing, and training good people is going to be more important than ever, and also more difficult. The paradox is that there is no shortage of human beings to do the job. If you look at the number of jobs versus the number of people in the country, it shouldn't be a problem. The problem is, of course, that those people don't know how to do the jobs that there are. And so this creates a couple of challenges for organizations. It means that those people who are trained and able to do the job are able to charge a premium. Salaries go way up for very specific employment categories. And a lot of the jobs that are left are not considered terribly desirable. They don't pay a lot of money. If you look at retail, for example, if you wonder why retail service isn't as great as we imagine it used to be, and largely that's a figment of your imagination, by the way, but if we consider that retail and food service isn't as good as it used to be, it could be that over half of the people hired in those jobs quit every year. The turnover rate in retail, for example, is 60%. So that's a problem, right? Then we look at things like where are we going to work? Remote work mandates have largely resulted in reduced headcount. Now, some of that, by the way, is intentional. We're thinking of dropping 15% of our management staff. If we use a go back to work policy or go back to the office policy, we're going to lose about 15% of our people. That's no coincidence. Now, are you losing the right 15% of that headcount is a legitimate question. But this doesn't address some of the changes in public policy that are going on. Think about challenges to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Think about back to work mandates that are fairly arbitrary, but no less strict. On one hand, organizations are going to celebrate, hey, we don't have to invest money in people that we don't want working for us anyway, which is a strange way of looking at it, but you hear this all the time. It's going to cause a rise in the cost of hiring certain people, especially in pools that are largely ignored or not accommodated. Employees, especially women, visible minorities, and the disabled, are likely going to suffer in the upheaval. But all this talk about returning to the office and going back to the norm, it's still going to cause a major upheaval in facilities, real estate, operating costs, because what does a company really need? Even if you return to the office and pretend like COVID never happened and we go back to the blessed before times, you may have fewer people than you had before. If you have a hybrid workplace, for example, Wednesday and Thursday, you might need as much space as you ever had because everybody's in the office, but you're still paying for office space that people aren't in the other 5 days a week. How many people do we need on site? What facilities do those people need? Do we need assigned desks? Do we need assigned offices? Can we do hoteling without causing all kinds of major problems? Is the work designed so that people doing social, interactive, collaborative work can get that done while those needing quiet and focus can do that? What the office is going to look like is going to change. And everybody who renewed their office leases lately or built space are going to find in the next 5 years that what they need and what they have are probably not the same thing. This is really going to impact collaboration, how people work together, how they face the public, since the idea of giant buildings with our names on it are probably going to become more and more impractical. So the nuts and bolts that we've kind of kicked down the road by having everybody return to work is now a challenge that organizations are going to have to face. Finally, and I have to be very careful here because I have some very strong opinions on this that may or may not match with yours. But whether you like it or not, we are about to enter a period of increased consolidation. In times of uncertainty, a lot of entrepreneurs say the heck with it. They retire, they close their businesses, others sell to a bigger entity, and this creates fewer but larger organizations. Whether or not the consolidation of entire industries in a few is a good idea is for someone other than me to decide. But just as an example, if you think about all the thousands of newspapers, radio stations, television stations, and streaming networks in the world, and then realize that in the US, 90% of those are in the hands of 6 companies, you understand that this is going to have some impact. It's easy to say that organizations have to choose what they're going to do, that, just make a decision and move on, but it's not that easy because organizations don't do anything. Organizations do not make decisions. Organizations do not take action. It's the people in those organizations that make those choices. So this is going to require a whole new, not a new set of skills. We've always needed things like resilience and good decision making. But we're going to have to actually build and cultivate those skills in the next few years so that the people leading organizations are making good decisions. Now, in upcoming episodes, we're going to take this because just as how we got here was context for this conversation, the challenges that organizations are facing is context for what does this mean for individual workers and what does it mean for leaders inside these organizations. So if these are the challenges that organizations are facing, what it means for individual humans depends on satisfying these needs. So in future episodes, we're going to examine that. If you haven't heard the previous episodes of this podcast, please check them out at remarkablepodcast.com. And we'll talk to you next week about what all of these changes and all of these challenges mean for individuals. In the meantime, please check out kevineikenberry.com. We are at your service. If you have questions about how we can help your organization tackle these challenges, don't be shy. My name is Wayne Turmel. I'm Wayne at kevineikenberry.com, and we'll hope to see you on the next episode of The Evolving Workplace.